Elara Winslow thought she had finally outrun her past. After rebuilding her life from the ashes of betrayal, after rising into a woman the world now recognized and admired, she believed she was unshakable. But strength has a way of cracking in the quiet moments. And the night she learned the truth about the man targeting her, everything she had fought to protect suddenly felt fragile again. For the first time in years, the fear she thought she had buried clawed its way back to the surface. Her breath faltered, her vision blurred, her body trembled in a way she could not control. It was a panic attack, sharper and more merciless than any wound inflicted by her ex-husband, Marcus Veldon, or the ruthless financier pulling strings from the shadows. And in that moment of collapse, Elara faced a truth she had spent years avoiding. Healing does not erase the past. It only makes you brave enough to confront it. But she was not alone. Adrian Hale, the man who had stood beside her quietly and faithfully, helped her breathe again, helped her return to herself, and reminded her of a strength that came not from perfection, but from choosing to rise even when she felt broken. That night, in the stillness of his cabin, Elara made the decision that would change everything. She would stop running, she would stop hiding, and she would face the storm waiting for her. The chandeliers of the Grand Belmore glittered above Elara Winslow like constellations suspended in crystal. The hotel's grand foyer hummed with conversation and camera flashes, but beneath the elegance and polished marble, she sensed the echo of a night she had tried for a year to forget. She stepped forward slowly, her gown trailing behind her in a soft current of silk, every movement steady and deliberate. A year ago, she had left this place as a woman whose marriage had been shattered publicly and brutally. Tonight she returned as the face of New Horizons, the fastest-growing empowerment network in the region, and the honoree of the evening's most prestigious award. Yet the air did not feel welcoming. Elara heard the whispers before she saw the faces that carried them. A pair of guests near the fountain glanced her way before leaning together, their voices brushing the air like poisoned threads. They spoke of her fortune. They questioned whether her influence was earned. They repeated tired suspicions about her father's involvement and the idea that she had risen only because of money, not merit. She kept her expression serene. She had learned long ago that reacting gave power to those who wanted to unmake her. Even so, a faint pulse of irritation tugged at her chest. Rumors always carried intention, and this one felt sharpened by purpose. An attendant guided her through the hall toward the main ballroom, where soft golden light spilled across rows of tables. As she stepped inside, conversations rippled and heads turned. Some smiled warmly, others studied her with the cautious curiosity reserved for those who had survived public destruction and somehow emerged stronger. She walked with calm precision, refusing to let the weight of the room disturb her. Then her steps faltered. Near the archway that framed the central dining area, she spotted a familiar figure, Celine Hart. Once, the woman had stood at Marcus Veldon's side while he dismantled Elara's dignity in front of investors. Once, the woman Elara had silently blamed for the collapse of everything she had built in her marriage. Celine no longer carried the confident spark she once did. Instead, she watched Elara with tentative resolve, as if holding a truth she was unsure how to release. Elara forced her gaze away and continued toward her table. The past had taken enough from her and did not deserve another breath. A server offered her a glass of champagne, but she pushed it gently aside. The lights flickered as the ceremony began, casting the room into a softened glow. Then a shift in the atmosphere drew every eye toward the entrance. Marcus Veldon walked in. Her former husband moved with a strained composure, his suit crisp but not tailored, his shoulders narrower than she remembered. Time had carved honesty into his expression, stripping away the arrogance he once wore like armor. His new wife, Liana Crest, followed beside him in a quiet lavender gown that suited her gentle presence. Together they formed an image that was unexpectedly fragile. Elara felt the familiar tightening in her chest. The past rarely entered quietly. Marcus noticed her immediately. His posture wavered, then steadied, as if preparing to approach her, but unsure whether he had the right. Liana touched his arm lightly, her encouragement soft and unobtrusive. Guests watched the exchange with eager curiosity. Elara kept her gaze neutral, unwilling to feed the spectacle. As she adjusted the folds of her dress, another presence settled beside her. Adrian Hale. His arrival was silent but grounding. He offered a subtle nod, his attention briefly flicking toward Marcus before returning to her with calm steadiness. Elara felt her breath ease. Adrian possessed a quiet strength that never demanded space, yet always filled it with reassurance. The tension in his jaw revealed his concern, but he did not voice it. He understood that this room, with its memories and its judgments, was a battlefield she had prepared herself to face. The ceremony began. Names echoed from the stage. Applause rose and fell like tides against the ballroom walls. Elara tried to focus, but her thoughts drifted to the undercurrent of rumors that had shadowed her all evening. Someone had revived old doubts and dressed them in new whispers. Someone wanted her credibility fractured. Her name was called. Applause surged. She rose gracefully, walking toward the illuminated stage as if the ground itself supported her ascent. The lights brightened until the audience blurred into a soft gold horizon. The award felt cool and weighty in her hands. She stepped toward the microphone and let the silence settle. She spoke about perseverance, about rebuilding from the debris of a life once defined by someone else's ambition, about the resilience of women who refuse to stay small. She did not mention betrayal, scandal, or Marcus. She did not acknowledge the rumors or the scrutiny. Instead, she offered a narrative shaped by power reclaimed through choice, effort, and unwavering authenticity. When she finished, applause rolled through the ballroom like warm thunder. As she walked down the steps, she found Adrian's gaze first, steady, proud, then Celine's, nervous, then Marcus's, heavy with something that looked like remorse. A subtle chill moved through her. The night had stirred something in the shadows, something unfinished, something waiting. Elara lifted her chin, composed but alert. The past was not done speaking, and neither was the storm quietly gathering beyond the edges of the ballroom lights. The ballroom glowed with warm gold light as servers drifted between tables, refilling glasses and delivering polished plates. Laughter rose from nearby groups, but beneath the surface of the gala, a quiet tension threaded through the air. Elara Winslow felt it long before she saw its source. Rumors had a way of moving like smoke, curling through the smallest spaces until they wrapped around the room's attention. She sensed them drifting toward her again, persistent and deliberate. She excused herself from a cluster of guests and stepped toward the back corridor where the sound softened. Her heels clicked lightly against the marble, echoing in the narrower space. Away from the thousand eyes of the ballroom, she finally allowed her shoulders to release a fraction of their tightness. She had always expected her return to the Grand Belmore to be complicated, but she had not anticipated the growing storm of whispers that seemed to follow her every step tonight. A low murmur floated from a nearby corner. Two staff members spoke quietly as they organized trays, unaware that Elara stood within earshot. Their conversation paused when they saw her, but their expressions said enough. They had been discussing the articles circulating online. She thanked them politely and moved past, though a familiar sting traveled through her chest. Someone had seeded doubts about her again, someone who understood exactly how to aim where it would hurt. Elara reached a quieter alcove where tall windows overlooked the city. The skyline shimmered against the night, a reminder of how far she had climbed. Yet shadows gathered at the edges of her confidence, urging her to acknowledge that success often attracted its own predators. A soft voice broke the stillness behind her. Elara. She turned. Celine Hart stood a few steps away, hands clasped lightly in front of her, as if holding herself together. The once radiant woman who had moved effortlessly through elite crowds now appeared unsettled, her eyes flickering with nervous restraint. Elara regarded her with calm neutrality. "What do you need, Celine?" Celine hesitated, then approached slowly, her steps measured and almost fragile. She stopped at a respectful distance, searching Elara's expression as if expecting to be dismissed. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight that felt years older than the woman who had once thrived in luxury. "I know I have no right to ask for your time," she said, but something is happening that you need to know." Elara held her composure even as curiosity prickled along her spine. After all this time, Celine had chosen tonight of all nights to approach her, the night of her award. The night Marcus returned with his new life. The night rumors swelled like a tide, determined to erode her foundation. Elara gestured subtly for Celine to continue. Celine exhaled slowly, gathering her courage. "Someone is trying to undermine you. Those articles did not appear by accident. They were placed and pushed by people who know your influence is growing too quickly for their comfort." Elara's pulse tightened. She had suspected it, but confirmation from Celine was something else entirely. Still, she refused to be baited by half answers. "Who?" Celine's eyes darkened with hesitation. "I should not be the one to expose this. However, I can no longer remain silent. I know where the rumors started, and I know who paid to spread them. The problem is that the person behind it is dangerous for reasons you are not aware of." The city lights shimmered on the windows, casting shifting reflections across Celine's face. Her voice trembled as she continued. "Marcus is in trouble, Elara, more than you realize, and someone wants to use you to get to him." Elara felt a sharp chill along her spine. For a moment, the memory of her past life with Marcus rose like a submerged shard of her past life with Marcus. The long nights waiting for him, the lies, the humiliation, the final collapse. She had severed everything that bound her to him. She had rebuilt. She had risen. And yet the past seemed desperate to pull her back into its undertow. Elara stepped closer, her tone steady. "Why come to me now?" "Because I owe you the truth," Celine said quietly. "And because you are the only one who can stop what is coming. Marcus made mistakes, but he is not the one orchestrating this. He is caught in something bigger than he understands. And if this continues, it will not only end his career but also his life. It will destroy everything you built, too." Elara studied her carefully. Celine had once been the catalyst of her downfall, but the woman standing before her now carried none of the arrogance she remembered. Instead, she carried remorse and fear. Before Elara could respond, footsteps approached from the ballroom. Adrian appeared in the corridor entrance, searching for her. His expression eased when he found her, but his gaze sharpened slightly when he saw Celine. "Everything all right?" he asked. Elara nodded gently, but her mind raced with questions. Someone was manipulating her reputation. Someone was pulling strings behind Marcus's missteps. And Celine, of all people, had come to warn her. Elara turned back to the window, watching the city pulse with distant light. The night had begun with ceremony and applause, but now a different current stirred beneath the glittering surface. A current of secrets, intentions, players emerging from shadowed corners. As Celine waited anxiously for her response, Elara felt something shift inside her. Not fear, not anger, a sense of awakening. The past was moving again, and this time she intended to face it on her own terms. Marcus Velden woke before sunrise each day, not because he wanted to, but because the walls of the one-bedroom apartment he now rented had a way of pressing in on him the moment his eyes opened. The space was quiet, except for the hum of an old radiator and the distant rumble of early morning traffic. It was a far cry from the penthouse he once boasted about, the one he had walked through with arrogant confidence while Elara trailed behind him like a silent shadow. Now he lived above a laundromat where the scent of detergent seeped through the floorboards, and the only thing waiting for him in the mornings was the clock he punched at the factory. He sat on the edge of the bed and rubbed his temples. His reflection in the cracked mirror across the room startled him every time. His face looked older, sharper, stripped of the easy charm he once wielded like a weapon, and months of financial collapse had carved exhaustion into his features. He inhaled slowly, trying to gather himself before another day began. Liana Crest stirred beneath the sheets. She blinked sleepily as she looked at him, her expression soft with concern rather than disappointment. Marcus still had not understood how someone like her chose to remain in the wreckage he had created. She reached out, touching his hand lightly. "Long day ahead." He nodded, his voice rough, something like that. Liana sat up, her quiet presence filling the room with a steadiness he had come to rely on. She never asked for more than he could give. She never compared him to the man he once was. Sometimes Marcus wondered if that grace was the only thing anchoring him these days. He left the apartment shortly after and walked through the cold morning streets to the bus stop. His breath fogged in the air as he waited among strangers who neither recognized him nor cared who he used to be. That anonymity had been painful at first, but now it felt like a strange sort of relief. The bus ride was long and bumpy, rattling through neighborhoods he had once ignored, passing street corners he never would have set foot on during the height of his success. Success, he now understood, had been borrowed, not earned. Much of it had come from Elara's silent labor, her unnoticed intelligence, her unwavering belief in him. Belief he had repaid with betrayal. The guilt followed him like a shadow. At the factory, Marcus moved through the motions, hard hat, gloves, machinery that roared and hissed. The foreman barked orders, and Marcus obeyed them without argument. There was no room for ego here. Errors cost time. Time costs money. Money was something Marcus no longer had the luxury to lose. During his lunch break, he sat alone at a metal table, while other workers joked and traded stories. He listened, occasionally offering a nod, but never truly joining. His mind drifted back to the gala the night before, to Elara, walking across the ballroom with the grace he could never replicate. To the award she accepted with a calm that reminded him how far she had come since the night he ruined everything. He had thought about approaching her 100 times, but had been unprepared for the reality of seeing her again. She did not flinch at the sight of him. She did not shrink. She did not burn with resentment. She acknowledged him, controlled and distant, as if she had mastered the art of living beyond his shadow. He had signed the divorce papers months ago, but last night was the moment he truly understood that she no longer belonged to the world that had once revolved around him. She had become someone he could not reach, not because she refused him, but because she had outgrown the version of life he offered. When work ended, Marcus returned home exhausted. The sky outside had darkened, and the streetlights flickered as he climbed the narrow staircase to the apartment. Liana met him at the door with a tired smile, holding 2 cups of tea. He accepted one, grateful for her presence. As they sat at the small kitchen table, she finally spoke the question she had been holding. "You saw her last night." Marcus nodded. There was no point pretending otherwise. Liana oversaw him, her eyes steady. "Do you regret it? All of it?" He exhaled slowly, the weight in his chest heavy every day. Liana did not flinch. She had known his past when she chose to stand beside him. She reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "Then make it right. Whatever that means for you now." Her words lingered long after she rose to wash the dishes. Later, when Marcus lay awake in the dark, he replayed the quiet warning Celine had whispered to him weeks before. Someone was stirring up trouble, someone dangerous, someone who wanted to use him as a means of leverage. He had tried to shut it out, hoping the storm would pass without reaching him or Elara. But storms never avoid the places already broken. He closed his eyes and finally accepted the truth. He could not outrun the past, and if he did nothing, it would devour not only him, but the one person he had already hurt beyond repair. Morning was still hours away, but Marcus knew what he had to do. For the first time in years, he finally planned to face his consequences head-on. Adrian Hale had always prided himself on being a man who understood restraint. In business, he was measured. In conflict, he was calm. In love, he was deliberate, choosing each step with the awareness that trust was fragile and healing was a process rather than a destination. But as he followed Elara out of the ballroom and into the quiet corridor where Celine had cornered her with hushed urgency, he felt something rare flicker through him. Something sharp. Something he rarely allowed himself to feel. Jealousy was too simple a word for it. It was not the fear of losing Elara. It was the fear of losing the peace she had finally found. When he approached, Celine stepped back, weighed down by the guilt of someone who knew her presence carried history. Elara met his gaze, her posture poised yet tense, and he immediately sensed the gravity of what had just unfolded between the two women. "Everything all right?" he asked, his voice even, though the concern beneath it simmered. Elara offered a reassuring nod, but her eyes betrayed thought rather than calm. She touched his arm briefly. "Later," she whispered. He accepted the answer, though the question tugged at him long after they stepped back inside the ballroom. They sat together as the evening wound down, but Adrian's attention was locked on the subtle shifts in Elara's expression. She was distant, not withdrawn, not distressed, but pulled inward by something that gnawed at her focus. When she excused herself to greet a donor, Adrian drifted to the edge of the room, giving her space while keeping her in sight. Yet space was not quiet tonight. Space was filled with thoughts he had been trying to ignore for months. In the year he had known Elara, her past had always been a quiet echo in the background. She never hid it. She never denied the scars or the mistakes or the grief. But she also never let it command her future. Adrian admired that, loved that. Yet as the shadows of Marcus Veldon returned with a strength that unsettled the night, he realized how naive it had been to imagine the past would remain dormant. He watched Marcus across the ballroom. The man who had once been a polished symbol of ambition now moved with the humility of someone who had been broken down to bone. Marcus's eyes had found Elara multiple times during the evening. Pain, regret, desperation. Adrian recognized all three instantly. What unsettled him was not Marcus's presence, but the possibility of his influence. Adrian leaned against the polished bar counter, ordering a glass of sparkling water as guests laughed behind him. The bartender glanced at him with polite curiosity. Long night. Adrian exhaled quietly. Longer than expected. He scanned the ballroom again. Elara was smiling as she conversed with two older philanthropists, but the tension in her shoulders remained. Celine hovered nearby, as if waiting for the moment she'd be called back into the conversation. And Marcus, though engaged with Liana, kept glancing over as though tethered by something unfinished. Adrian's jaw tightened before he caught himself. He was not a man given to insecurity, but he was a man who loved fiercely, and he knew what unresolved history could do to even the strongest heart. A familiar voice interrupted his thoughts. "She looks good." Marcus had approached quietly. Adrian straightened, the muscles along his spine going taut. Marcus's tone held no arrogance, only a lingering sorrow, but it still sent a dull heat through Adrian's bloodstream. Adrian's reply was calm. "She always does." Marcus nodded slowly, as though absorbing the truth of that. He hesitated before speaking again. "I did not come here to cause trouble," he said. "I just needed a chance to speak with her, to apologize properly, to warn her about what's happening." He paused, running a hand through his hair, the gesture tired and unguarded. "I know she has moved on. I see that, and I am glad for it, truly. However, I also know that I left behind a mess that has become bigger than I initially understood." Adrian felt a pulse of irritation flare beneath his ribs. He kept his voice even. "If you want to apologize, apologize, but do not pull her into anything that endangers her." Marcus met his eyes with an intensity that startled him. "That is precisely why I need her to listen. She is already in danger, whether she is aware of it or not." Before Adrian could respond, the final announcement of the evening filled the ballroom. Guests rose from their seats, gathering coats and exchanging goodbyes. Marcus stepped back, his expression tight with worry. He turned toward Liana, who waited with a reserved smile. Adrian watched him leave before returning to Elara's side. The room was emptying quickly, but she remained lost in thought, her hand brushing lightly against her award as if grounding herself. When he reached her, she released a careful breath and looked up at him with the honesty he always valued. "We need to talk," she said softly. He nodded. "I know." They walked toward the doors together, bathed in the fading warmth of the gala lights. Outside, the city glowed beneath the night sky, alive with distant movement. Adrian held the door for her, but before stepping through it, he looked at her with a quiet resolve. "Whatever is coming, Elara, you will not face it alone." She met his gaze, something vulnerable and steadfast flickering beneath her calm exterior. "I know," she said. But neither of them realized just how quickly the past would rise, and how deeply it would test them both. The following morning arrived with a pale wash of sunlight stretching over the city, but Elara Winslow felt none of its warmth. The echoes of the gala clung to her like a second skin as she stood by the wide living room window of her apartment, gazing at the skyline without truly seeing it. The city hummed with its usual rhythm, yet to her it felt strangely hushed, as if waiting for a decision she had not yet made. Behind her, the soft clatter of dishes came from the kitchen. Adrian Hale moved with his usual calm efficiency, preparing coffee while giving her the space she needed. He understood her silences better than anyone. It was one of the reasons she trusted him so profoundly, but this morning that trust felt fragile beneath the weight of everything Celine had revealed. Adrian approached and handed her a cup. She murmured a quiet thanks, but her mind remained far from the room. He watched her for a moment, studying the lines of tension carved into her shoulders. "You have been awake since before sunrise," he said gently. Elara finally looked at him. Her eyes were thoughtful rather than distressed, but the heaviness in them was unmistakable. She took a slow sip of coffee before speaking. "Celine knows more than she told me last night. I could feel it. And whatever she is holding back, it is connected to the articles, the rumors, and Marcus." Adrian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He set his own cup aside and stood beside her at the window. "Let us start with the part you are not saying," he murmured. "Are you worried about what this means for him? Or what does it mean for you?" Elara paused, unsure how to answer. The truth was complicated. Marcus had hurt her beyond measure, yet she did not want him crushed by forces darker than his own mistakes. But she also knew that danger aimed at him could easily be redirected at her, especially if someone wanted leverage. Both, she finally admitted. "And neither. I do not owe him anything. However, I will also not let someone else use our past against us." Adrian nodded, his expression thoughtful but resolute. "We will figure this out. Together." She felt the words settle into her, steady and comforting. But still she turned back to the window. Something gnawed at her, a whisper of intuition telling her that Celine had come forward, not out of fear for Marcus, but out of fear for herself. And people rarely fear for themselves unless the threat is both real and close. Her phone buzzed on the counter, snapping the moment. Elara crossed the room and lifted it. A message from an unknown number. A link to another article. She opened it slowly, bracing herself. The headline struck like a blade. "Behind the New Horizons Empire. Who is Elara Winslow really?" It was worse than the first wave of whispers. The article claimed she had manipulated investors. It hinted at irregularities in the early days of her foundation. It suggested her fortune was misused. None of it was true, but truth mattered far less than perception. Adrian stepped beside her, reading over her shoulder. Anger flickered in his eyes, sharp and controlled. "Whoever is doing this is escalating," he said quietly. "Fast." Elara set the phone down with a shaky breath. She refused to be shaken, yet the deliberate nature of the attacks unsettled her deeply. Someone wanted to destabilize her. Someone with resources. Someone who knew exactly where to aim. "We need answers," she said. "From Celine, from Marcus, from anyone who understands why these stories are appearing now." Adrian nodded. "I will reach out to a few contacts and check if anything unusual has been happening in Marcus's business records. If someone is using financial pressure against him, it will leave a trail." Elara touched his arm lightly. "Thank you." His expression softened. "For you, always." Before she could respond, the doorbell rang. The unexpected sound tightened something inside her. Adrian's posture shifted immediately, alert but composed. Elara crossed the room and opened the door cautiously. Celine Hart stood in the hallway. Her usually polished appearance was understated now, replaced with a strained expression that bordered on desperation. Her hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together. "I am sorry for coming unannounced," Celine said. "But I need to talk to you. Now." Elara stepped aside, allowing her in. Adrian offered a polite, guarded nod. Celine paced to the center of the room, unable to stay still. "I did not tell you everything last night because I was afraid." But after what happened at the gala, I know you have to hear it. Marcus is not the only target. You are. And if you do not act now, the situation will get worse." Elara exchanged a tense glance with Adrian. "Speak," she urged. Celine inhaled shakily. Months ago, Marcus borrowed money from a private investor, a man named Roderick Kane. The name alone chilled the air. Kane was known in certain circles as a ruthless financier skilled in exploiting desperation. Celine continued. Marcus thought he could repay it quickly, but the deal was a trap. Kane wanted control, not repayment. When Marcus failed to deliver, Kane shifted tactics. He started digging into you. Elara felt heat rise beneath her skin. Why me? Because ruining your credibility would destroy Marcus by association. And because your success threatens Kane's influence in several sectors, including philanthropic funding. Celine paused, her voice trembling. He sees your foundation as competition. He sees your visibility as a threat. Adrian stepped forward. And the articles, paid for directly or indirectly. Kane uses intermediaries, but I have seen the patterns. Celine met Elara's gaze with pleading desperation. I am telling you this because Kane does not stop until he has what he wants. And right now, he wants Marcus broken and you discredited. The room fell silent. Elara felt something steady and fierce rise within her, a strength honed through years of rebuilding. She lifted her chin, meeting both Adrian's and Celine's eyes. Then, it is time, she said softly, for me to decide exactly what I am going to do. And the city outside seemed to hold its breath. The quiet in Elara Winslow's apartment felt fragile, like a thin sheet of glass stretched across the room. After Celine left, the door closing softly behind her, Elara remained standing in the center of the living room, as if rooted to the floor. Adrian watched her closely, giving her space while staying near enough to steady her if the weight of everything suddenly became too much. She pressed a hand against her forehead and took a slow, deep breath. Her thoughts churned with sharp edges. Roderick Kane was not just a threat, he was a strategist, a figure known for dismantling reputations with surgical precision. If he had set his sights on Marcus, she understood the destructive potential of his actions. But if he had set his sights on her, the implications were far more personal. Adrian stepped forward. Elara, sit. His voice was gentle, carrying the quiet authority that always grounded her. She allowed him to guide her to the edge of the couch. Her hands were steady, but her heartbeat thrummed with a restless rhythm. Adrian sat beside her, not too close, but close enough that she felt the warmth of his presence. He rested his elbows on his knees, his gaze fixed on the coffee table as he gathered his thoughts. Kane is dangerous, he said finally. If he feels threatened by new horizons, he will go further than orchestrating online attacks. He will test the people around you. He will pressure donors. He will weaponize fear. Elara lowered her gaze, her voice calm but firm. Fear has been used against me before. It did not work then. It will not work now. Adrian turned to her, his eyes softening. I know who you are, Elara. Strength is not your weakness, but you are carrying more than anyone should face alone. Let me help. She met his gaze and felt the sincerity in it. Adrian had always been her anchor, but what loomed ahead required clarity she had not yet found. She rose from the couch and walked toward the balcony doors. The city beyond shimmered with jewel-toned light, unaware of the storm gathering around her. Adrian followed her with his gaze, but remained seated. He could sense what she needed. Space. Not distance from him, but space within herself. Elara slid open the balcony door and stepped out into the cool morning air. The wind brushed against her skin, carrying the muted sound of traffic from the streets below. She rested her hands on the railing and let her breath steady. Memories of her past life flickered through her mind. Nights spent waiting for Marcus to come home. The suffocating need to prove herself. The endless attempts to fix what had already broken. And the moment everything shattered at the Grand Belmore, forcing her to rebuild from the ground up. She had not survived all of that to be undone by a man hiding in the shadows of power. The sliding door opened behind her. Adrian padded into the crisp air, stopping beside her but not touching her. "What would you like to do?" he asked, his tone steady and respectful. "Not what you think you should do, what you want." Elara closed her eyes. For a moment, all she heard was the hum of the city and the quiet strength in Adrian's question. When she opened them again, her resolve had sharpened. "I want the truth," she said, "all of it, and I want to protect what I have built. Marcus may have made his choices, but someone using me as leverage to destroy him is unacceptable." Adrian nodded. "Then we start with the source. Cain will not speak willingly, but the people he uses will leave traces." Elara turned toward him. "And Celine, she is part of this whether she wants to be or not." Adrian hesitated before responding. "Do you trust her?" Elara searched her own thoughts before answering. "I trust that she is afraid. And fear tells the truth more honestly than guilt ever does." They returned indoors, the conversation shifting into strategy, but Elara felt a fatigue settling beneath her determination. She rubbed her temples lightly, a wave of dizziness tightening the edges of her vision. Adrian noticed immediately. "Elara, sit down." She tried to brush it off. "I am fine." But the unease grew stronger, a ripple of panic tightening across her chest with startling speed. She sank onto the couch, gripping the edge as her breath hitched. Adrian knelt in front of her, his voice soft but urgent. "Look at me. Slow breaths. In through your nose, out through your mouth." Elara tried to focus, but the room felt too bright, too close. Her body trembled, betraying her calm exterior. She hated the sensation of losing control, hated how quickly her past could manifest in the present. Adrian held her hands gently. "I am right here. You are safe." She clung to his voice, letting it guide her back into her body, allowing it to remind her of the world beyond panic. After several long moments, her breath slowed, and the tension began to ease. She wiped her cheek, surprised to find a tear she did not remember shedding. Adrian stayed kneeling in front of her, his expression filled with quiet compassion. "Elara, you do not have to face this alone. You do not have to be unbreakable to be strong." She exhaled shakily, steadying herself. "You are right, but I cannot hide from this, not anymore." He stood and extended a hand to her. "Then let us move forward, together." She took his hand, rising slowly. The panic did not vanish entirely, but it no longer controlled her. Something inside her had shifted, aligning with a deeper resolve. Elara looked out the window once more, the city glowing like a challenge waiting to be confronted. The choice had been made. She would not run. She would not hide. She would meet the storm head-on. The road wound through towering evergreens as Elara Winslow sat in the passenger seat of Adrian Hale's car, watching the scenery shift from the concrete of the city to the quiet expanse of the northern woods. Sunlight filtered through thick branches, scattering in soft patterns across the windshield. The drive was long and silent, but not uncomfortable. Adrian's presence was steady beside her, grounding her even as her mind churned with thoughts too tangled to speak aloud. They were headed to his family's cabin, a secluded place he had once described as a sanctuary. A place untouched by the noise of the world. He had suggested they stay there for a few days, away from the swirl of accusations and shadows tightening around her. At first, Elara hesitated. Running felt too close to surrender. But after the panic that had overtaken her the day before, she understood she needed distance not from the fight, but from the constant pressure suffocating her clarity. As the car climbed the final hill, the cabin came into view through the trees. It was simple and elegant, built of warm timber with a stone chimney and expansive windows that reflected the forest like a still pond. When Adrian parked, the quiet settled over them like a soft blanket. Elara stepped out, inhaling the crisp scent of pine and cold earth. It felt strangely like stepping into another world. Adrian carried their bags inside, lighting the fireplace while she explored the space. The cabin was filled with earthy tones and gentle textures. Shelves lined with books, a worn leather chair by the window, a soft throw blanket draped across the couch. It felt lived in, yet peaceful, a place that had seen 1,000 quiet mornings and 1,000 unspoken thoughts. Elara traced her fingers along the edge of a bookshelf, pausing on a framed photograph of a younger Adrian standing with his father. She could see the resemblance in the steady posture and calm eyes. Adrian's voice reached her from behind. "He built this place when I was 14, Adrian said. Wanted somewhere that felt like a pause when life demanded too much." Elara turned toward him. "It is beautiful." He offered a faint smile. "So are you, when you finally let yourself rest." She gave a small huff of disbelief, but warmth touched her expression. She sank onto the couch, letting her body relax for the first time in days. Adrian watched her quietly before sitting beside her, not touching her but close enough that she felt his presence like a supportive hand. "You do not have to talk yet," he said softly. "Just breathe. The rest will come when you are ready." Elara nodded, letting the firelight wash over her face. Hours passed in a silence punctuated only by the crackle of the logs. Eventually she spoke, her voice soft but steady. "When Celine told me it was Cain, a part of me was relieved. Not because he is less dangerous than I feared, but because his motives are predictable. He wants power, influence, control. Those are things I can anticipate." Adrian listened without interruption. "But the part of me that still hurts," she continued, "the part I thought I had buried, resurfaced when she mentioned Marcus. Not because I care for him the way I used to, I do not, but because the past always finds new ways to test whether you are truly free from it." Adrian shifted slightly closer. "And are you?" Elara stared into the fire. "I thought I was, but yesterday proved I still carry pieces of that life inside me, pieces I do not want." Adrian nodded slowly, his voice gentle. "Healing is not the absence of memory. It is the ability to face those memories without letting them own you." She turned toward him, her gaze searching his. "And what if they try to own me anyway? Then I will help you return them." The simple certainty in his tone softened something deep inside her. She leaned back against the couch, allowing her body to rest fully. Later, after a quiet dinner, Elara stepped outside. The night air was cool against her skin, the sky open and studded with stars. The forest surrounded her with a serene stillness that felt almost sacred. She walked a few steps into the clearing, hugging her arms loosely around herself. "The truth is," she whispered to the quiet, "I am tired. Tired of fighting shadows, tired of proving myself, tired of being the one who always stands firm." Leaves rustled behind her. Adrian joined her in the clearing, stopping beside her, but remaining silent until she looked at him. "You do not always have to be strong," he said softly. "Not with me." She felt the words settle into her chest like a warm glow. For a moment, the vulnerability she had kept tightly sealed broke through, and her voice wavered. "What if I fall apart? Then I will be there to help you stand again." Elara shut her eyes, letting the reassurance wash through her. When she opened them, tears shimmered but did not fall. She exhaled, long and trembling, releasing a weight she had carried alone for too long. They remained in the clearing for several minutes, wrapped in the quiet hum of the forest. No accusations, no rumors, no ghosts clawing at her confidence. Just the steady presence of a man who saw every fractured piece of her and stayed. When they finally returned inside, Elara felt a sense of relief, not a feeling of being healed, not resolved, but grounded. For the first time since the gala, clarity began to form. She knew what she needed. Time to understand the truth without fear clouding her vision. Time to gather her strength. Time to choose her next move with intention. In the stillness of the cabin, Elara Winslow reclaimed something she had lost in the chaos: herself. 6 months later, the city rose before Elara Winslow like a promise she had earned. The morning sun cast soft gold across the skyline as she stepped out of the car in front of the newest New Horizons Community Center, the 8th she had opened since returning from the cabin. The building stood tall and bright, its glass exterior reflecting the bustling streets and hopeful faces gathering near the entrance. Today was its inauguration, a milestone woven from months of relentless work, renewed purpose, and quiet healing. Elara smoothed the front of her blazer and took a deep breath. The scent of fresh paint mixed with the crisp morning air. She felt grounded, steady, different. not reborn, but rebuilt with intention. What had begun as a refuge for women seeking freedom had grown into a movement, and she had grown with it. Adrian Hale stepped out beside her, his presence warm and reassuring. He adjusted his suit jacket, though his eyes stayed trained on her with quiet admiration. Their relationship had deepened over the months in ways that felt gentle and lasting. They moved together with an ease that came from shared trust, from conversations whispered in late-night kitchens, from moments of vulnerability and laughter that knit their lives more tightly. "This is your day," he said softly. Elara smiled. "Ours," she corrected. Inside the center, volunteers prepared welcome tables while staff finalized registration lists for the programs launching that afternoon. Some women recognized Elara immediately and rushed to greet her with gratitude shining in their expressions. She listened to their stories one by one, offering encouragement, guidance, and sometimes simply presence. Her foundation had grown beyond her expectations, expanding into job training programs, mental health resources, mentorship circles, and legal advocacy teams. It was no longer just a project, it was a lifeline. As the ceremony began, donors, journalists, and city officials filled the main hall. Elara stepped onto the stage amid applause. She spoke not with the intensity of someone fighting the world, but with the calm authority of a woman who had learned to fight wisely. She talked about the power of community, the courage of self-discovery, and the beauty that comes from rebuilding after brokenness. She spoke of the women whose lives had been transformed, as well as those still seeking their first step toward freedom. When the applause faded, Adrian joined her on stage, offering a subtle squeeze of her hand. It was his way of saying he was here, steady and constant, even when the spotlight demanded her alone. As guests mingled, a familiar notification buzzed on her phone. A message from Marcus Felden. She hesitated before opening it. Their communication had become infrequent but civil. He had left the city with Liana months earlier, settling in a small coastal town where he worked part-time at a community college. Therapy had steadied him, and for the first time in their tangled history, he seemed at peace. The message was simple. "Congratulations on the new center. You deserve every bit of this." Elara stared at the screen for a moment before typing her reply. "Thank you, Marcus. I hope you and Liana are well." She meant it. Time had softened the jagged edges of what once consumed her. Soon after, Celine Hart appeared at the entrance of the hall. She looked healthier, more anchored. With Elara's help, she had taken a position coordinating outreach programs at another New Horizons center. Her journey toward making amends had not been easy, but she had approached it with humility. "You did it again," she said with a small smile, "another place for people to begin." Elara hugged her, grateful for the complicated but necessary bond they had formed. Healing was rarely linear, and forgiveness was seldom simple, but both had found a place to land between them. Later that afternoon, as visitors departed and the center settled into its first hours of operation, Elara and Adrian stepped onto the rooftop deck. From there, the city sprawled in all directions, alive and vibrant. Elara leaned against the railing, her eyes tracing the horizon. "You have changed," Adrian said quietly. She looked over at him. "I hope so, in a good way." "In the best way," he answered. "You carry yourself differently, as if you finally believe in the strength everyone else already sees." She felt her throat tighten with warmth. The cabin had marked the beginning of that shift, but the months that followed had solidified it. She no longer moved through life waiting for the ground to crumble beneath her. She no longer measured her worth by the echoes of her past. She stood firmly in her own narrative now, defined by choice and conviction. Adrian reached into his pocket and revealed a small velvet pouch. Elara blinked at it in surprise. "Do not panic," he said with a teasing softness. "This is not what you think." He pulled out a thin silver band, elegant and straightforward, a promise ring rather than an engagement ring. "I will not ask you to rush anything," he said, "and I will not ask for more than you can give, but I want you to know that I choose you every day. Not for the woman you were forced to be, for the woman you decided to become." Elara felt her breath catch. She had once feared love would be another cage, but with Adrian, it felt like a door opening. She extended her hand, allowing him to slide the ring onto her finger. It fit as if it belonged there. They stood together, overlooking the city, the wind brushing softly around them. The world below buzzed with life, but up here, everything felt still, suspended in a quiet that belonged only to them. For the first time in years, Elara Winslow did not wonder what waited around the next corner. She knew. A future she was ready to claim. The Grand Belmore rose before Elara Winslow, like a memory carved in light and shadow. A whole year had passed since she had last stepped into its glittering halls, and now the hotel stood adorned for another annual gala, its marble floors gleaming beneath crystal chandeliers. This time, she arrived not as a woman clawing her way out of the wreckage of her past, but as the celebrated founder of a movement that had rippled far beyond her imagining. Her car door opened to a burst of camera flashes. Reporters leaned forward, capturing her every step as she walked up the grand staircase. The air tasted of autumn and applause. She moved with confidence, her gown a flowing cascade of dusk blue that shimmered like waves beneath the chandelier light. Adrian Hale walked beside her, his hand resting lightly on her back. They shared a glance, a soft electricity passing between them at the thought of what this night represented. Their return, their resilience, their quiet victory. Inside the ballroom, the atmosphere hummed with polite laughter and sparkling conversation. Familiar faces turned toward her with admiration, some with curiosity, others with a humbled awe. The last time she had been here, her life had been cracking open. Tonight, it felt rebuilt, polished, and anchored by something far more substantial than pride. Elara took a moment to absorb the scene, then stepped forward to greet the event directors. She was scheduled to receive the Visionary Leadership Award, an honor that made her smile with genuine gratitude. It was not the recognition she sought, but the confirmation that her choices had mattered. As she moved through the room, a hush fell over a small group near the entrance. Elara turned and saw Celine Hart approaching. Celine looked radiant yet humble, her expression soft with the maturity she had earned through mistakes, accountability, and months of hard work. "You look incredible," Celine said, warmth coloring her tone. "So do you," Elara replied, embracing her gently. The moment felt surreal, softened by forgiveness that had taken time, patience, and a willingness to understand the complexities of someone else's path. Celine had become an unexpected ally, someone who now carried purpose instead of regret. Before Elara could respond further, a familiar voice drifted across the room. Elara. Marcus Veldon stood near the staircase, his posture straight but cautious, as though unsure whether he had the right to exist in the same space as her. He wore a charcoal suit, well-fitting yet straightforward, and beside him stood Liana Crest, her presence steady and comforting as always. Elara approached them with a calm she had once believed impossible. Marcus offered a tentative smile. "Congratulations on the new center. I read the articles about your expansion. You are changing lives." "Thank you," she said, "truly. And I hope you and Liana are settling in well." "We are," Liana said gently. "The town has been good for us." There was a brief silence, then Marcus inhaled slowly. "I have said this before, but I want to reiterate it. I am sorry, Elara. Not for the scandal or the fallout, for the way I treated you long before that. You did not deserve the version of me you got." Elara studied him for a long moment. She realized she felt no sting of bitterness, no ache of what once was, only a quiet closure. Healing had stitched the wounds into something resilient and whole. "Thank you, Marcus," she said. "And I hope your new chapter is a good one." Liana smiled with visible relief, and Marcus's shoulders eased, as if a weight he had carried too long had finally been allowed to fall. As Elara rejoined Adrian, he met her with a subtle nod. "You handled that with grace," he murmured. She smiled. "Grace is the only thing worth carrying into the future." Later in the evening, the lights dimmed and a soft melody filled the ballroom. The host stepped onto the stage to present Elara with her award. Her name glowed across the screen as applause rose and surrounded her like a warm tide. She walked to the podium, the award cool in her hands, and spoke with quiet strength about resilience, community, and the freedom of choosing oneself. When she stepped off the stage, she found Adrian waiting beneath the arch of lights. His eyes held a warmth that made her catch her breath. He took her hand, led her to a quieter corner of the ballroom, and turned to face her fully. "I brought you something," he said. Her heart fluttered as he reached into his jacket pocket, but instead of a ring box, he revealed a small silver pendant shaped like a rising flame. "This is not a proposal," he said, his smile soft and steady. "It is a promise. A promise that whatever comes next, however the world shifts, I will be beside you. Not leading and not following, just with you." Elara brushed her thumb over the pendant, feeling the smooth edges and the warmth of his sincerity settling into her chest. "You already are," she whispered. Adrian clasped the pendant around her neck, the cool metal resting just above her heart. When she met his eyes again, something unspoken but powerful passed between them. The gala continued around them, but their world had narrowed to a single, quiet moment of understanding, of choice, of love that did not demand or confine, but uplifted. As they returned to the heart of the ballroom, applause swelled for the next honoree. Elara lifted her head, her steps steady, her heart calm. She had returned to the place where she had once lost everything. Tonight, she walked out with more than she ever believed she would find. 5 years later, the world felt both larger and gentler to Elara Winslow. Morning sunlight spilled across the polished floors of the New Horizons Institute, the newest and most ambitious project she had ever led. The building was a towering blend of glass and warm sandstone, standing proudly in the heart of the city like a monument to resilience. Where once there had been scattered community centers and rented offices, now there was a full-scale training institute dedicated to education, therapy, leadership, and rebuilding lives in ways Elara once only dreamed of. She walked through the lobby in a tailored ivory suit, greeting staff members as they prepared for the day. Her footsteps echoed softly, confident and unhurried. These halls carried laughter, purpose, and new beginnings for thousands of women every year. And today marked the official opening of 3 new satellite branches, bringing the total number of New Horizons centers to 20. 5 years ago, she had stood on broken ground. Today, she stood on foundations she had built from strength, intention, and the courage she thought she had lost. As she reviewed the final preparations for the ceremony, the elevator doors slid open and Adrian Hale stepped out. He wore a crisp navy suit that contrasted beautifully with the silver streak beginning to appear at his temples. Time had only made him more grounded, more certain, more himself. When he saw Elara, his expression softened in the familiar way that still warmed her every time. "Big day," he said, crossing the lobby to meet her. She nudged his shoulder. "They are all big days now." "Maybe," he said, "but this one is special. 5 years ago, you were fighting to keep the ground beneath your feet. Today, you are helping thousands find theirs." Elara smiled, the kind that reached her eyes and softened her entire face. Their relationship had deepened into a partnership built on honesty, tenderness, and shared purpose. After years together, they had found a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. No drama, no ego, just presence, love, and an unwavering respect for the person each of them continued to become. A staff member waved from across the room. "The first group of students has arrived." Elara excused herself and stepped toward the entrance. Dozens of women and young mothers walked through the glass doors, greeted by mentors and volunteers. Some carried toddlers, some carried uncertainty, all carried hope. Elara greeted each one warmly, offering reassurance where needed and direction when requested. Among the crowd, a young woman approached, clutching a navy envelope in her hands. She looked barely older than 20, her face bright yet nervous. "Are you Elara Winslow?" she asked. "I am," Elara said gently. The young woman handed her the envelope. "I was asked to deliver this to you personally. It is from someone who said you changed her life." Elara accepted it, curiosity stirring. She stepped aside and opened the envelope, unfolding a card adorned with hand-painted violets. Inside, in delicate handwriting, were the words, "Your courage helped me choose myself when the world tried to take that choice away from me. Thank you for giving me the tools to build a life of my own." This scholarship enabled me to become the person I needed to be. I named it in your honor." A soft breath escaped her. She turned the card over and saw the signature. "With gratitude, Miriam Alvarez, founder of the Winslow Scholarship for Women in Transition." Elara felt her heartbeat swell with a warmth and depth. She remembered Miriam, a quiet, trembling girl who had arrived years earlier with nothing but a backpack and a promise to herself that life would not end in the shadows she had come from. To see her thriving, offering scholarship funds of her own, felt like witnessing the full circle of a story she never expected to see come to completion. Adrian approached behind her. "Everything all right?" She held up the card. "Better than all right." He read it and smiled, a proud light shining in his eyes. "This is what legacy looks like," he murmured. Elara tucked the card safely into her pocket. Legacy. The word resonated within her. She had once believed her life would be defined by survival, by endurance, by the shadows of the love that broke her. But standing here in the institute she had built, surrounded by women rewriting their futures, she understood something different. Her life was not defined by the wounds she carried. It was defined by the light she had created from them. Later in the afternoon, after the main ceremony ended and the crowd began to disperse, Adrian took her hand and led her toward the rooftop garden. The space was filled with blooming jasmine, soft grasses, and a sweeping view of the skyline. The same skyline she once feared, the same skyline she now owned with quiet strength. He turned to her, something earnest in his gaze. "Elara, I have been waiting for the right moment." Her heart fluttered, warmth rising through her. Then he lowered himself to one knee. Her breath caught. The garden fell into perfect stillness. "Elara Winslow," he said softly, "I have loved you through every chapter. Through your bravery, through your healing, through your becoming. I do not want a future without you. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision. Not from fear. From the clarity that this was love chosen freely, not as escape, not as replacement, but as partnership. "Yes," she whispered, 1,000,000 times yes. Adrian rose and wrapped her in his arms as the city stretched endlessly behind them. 5 years of rebuilding had led her here. Not to a fairy tale, but to a life she had crafted, honored, and claimed with her entire being. A life filled with light. The morning sun filtered gently through the tall windows of the Winslow Hale residence, casting warm streaks of gold across the hardwood floors. Elara Winslow stood in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea as steam curled softly into the air. The house felt peaceful, wrapped in the quiet hum of a life she had once believed was impossible for her. Outside, the garden rustled in a light breeze, filled with early blooms that mirrored the calm unfolding within her. It had been 3 months since Adrian proposed, and planning their wedding had become a joyful, steady rhythm. A small ceremony, close friends, family. Nothing extravagant, nothing performative, just meaning and love. Elara would have been content with that and nothing more. Yet today, something unspoken pressed gently against her thoughts. A sense that one final chapter from her old life still lingered unresolved. A chapter she needed to close before she could step fully into her future. Adrian walked into the kitchen, still adjusting the cufflinks on his shirt. "Morning," he murmured, leaning down to kiss her cheek. He paused when he noticed the distant look in her eyes. "You were thinking about something. Or someone." She exhaled softly. Marcus reached out again. He asked if we could talk in person, one last time. Adrian studied her, his expression calm and supportive. "Do you want to see him?" "I think I need to," she answered quietly. "Not for him. For me. Some things were left unsaid, things I carried even after forgiving him. If I am going to start this new chapter with you, I should not leave any shadows behind." Adrian touched her hand gently. "Then I support whatever you decide. And I trust you completely." His certainty steadied her. She set down her cup, feeling the decision settle firmly into place. Later that afternoon, Elara arrived at a quiet coastal cafe that Marcus had suggested. The air carried the scent of salt and wildflowers, a soothing blend that enveloped her as she walked inside. Marcus Veldon sat near the windows overlooking the ocean. When he saw her, he rose immediately, not with the bravado he once wore, but with a humble, grateful expression. "Elara, thank you for coming." She nodded and sat across from him. Time had softened Marcus's face, not in the way years do, but in the way accountability does. His eyes now held a steadiness and the clarity that had been absent during the years they had shared. Liana had helped him rebuild, therapy had helped him understand, and life had taught him truths he should have seen long before. "I will get right to it," Marcus said, folding his hands. "I wanted to look you in the eye and say what I could never fully say before. Not just that, I am sorry, I have said those words. But I have spent the last few years learning why I became the man who hurt you, and understanding that none of that was your fault, not your responsibility, and not something you should have had to survive." Elara listened quietly, letting the sincerity settle between them. "You carried so much alone," he continued, "and I dismissed it. I dismissed you. I thought ambition meant never admitting weakness. I thought love meant ownership. I was wrong. I know I cannot undo what I did. However, I can promise you that the man I am now would have made a different choice. I am choosing differently every day." Elara felt no anger, no sorrow, just a gentle acceptance that came with time and distance. She met his gaze. "We were young, Marcus, and you were drowning in the version of success you believed you needed. I was drowning in trying to become someone worthy of the love you were not ready to give. Those versions of us are gone. We survived them. We are not those people anymore." Marcus released a slow breath of relief. "Thank you, truly." They sat in comfortable silence as waves rolled softly against the shore outside the window. Then Marcus reached into his jacket and placed a small envelope on the table. "This is something I wanted to give you. It is nothing huge, just closure." Elara opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. A letter he had written years ago, but had never sent. A letter filled with regret, recognition, and gratitude for what she had given him, even when he did not know how to receive it. She folded it carefully and placed it back in the envelope. "Thank you, Marcus. This means more than you know." When they parted, it was with a calm sense of finality, no lingering hurt, no unfinished edges. Just two lives that had once collided painfully are now stepping into separate futures with mutual understanding. Elara returned home just as twilight painted the sky in soft lavender hues. Adrian was waiting on the porch, leaning against the railing with that familiar quiet patience. "How did it go?" he asked. Elara stepped into his arms, resting her forehead against his shoulder. "It went precisely as it needed to. The past is closed now, all of it." He wrapped his arms around her and kissed the top of her head. "Good, then let us look forward." She lifted her gaze to his, her eyes warm with certainty. "Forward is all I want." They stood together as the first stars appeared overhead, the evening settling warmly around them. The past had finally loosened its hold. The future waited, bright and open. And for the first time in her life, Elara Winslow felt wholly, peacefully free. The late afternoon sun bathed the New Horizons Institute in a warm, golden glow as Elara Winslow stood on the rooftop terrace, watching the city pulse with life below. 5 years had passed since she had rebuilt her world from quiet ruin, and now the skyline reflected more than ambition or survival. It reflected the legacy she had shaped with unwavering intention, a legacy that reached far beyond her name. The terrace buzzed with celebration. Staff members, graduates, donors, and families gathered to honor the launch of 3 new international branches of New Horizons. Colorful banners fluttered in the soft breeze. Strings of lights swayed above their heads. Music drifted softly through the air, forming a warm tapestry of sound alongside laughter and heartfelt conversations. Elara stepped away from the railing and moved toward the cluster of guests waiting to greet her. Children tugged at their mothers' hands, excited to meet the woman who had helped shape their futures. Volunteers approached with gratitude in their eyes. Graduates embraced her as though greeting an old friend. Each interaction left a subtle imprint, a poignant reminder of why she had begun this journey. Across the terrace, Adrian Hale watched her with quiet admiration. He held himself with the same grounded grace he always had, But there was a softer dimension to him now, a certain ease born of knowing exactly where he belonged. When their eyes met, Elara felt the familiar warmth of being seen, not as an icon or leader, but as a woman loved for every facet of who she was. He made his way toward her, taking her hand as he arrived at her side. "You are glowing," he murmured. Elara laughed under her breath. "I am exhausted," she confessed. He shook his head. "No, this is something else entirely." Before she could respond, a young woman approached, holding a folder pressed tightly to her chest. Her expression was nervous yet hopeful. "Miss Winslow, may I speak with you?" "Of course," Elara said gently. The woman handed her the folder. "My name is Sophia Leone. I was part of the leadership program 2 years ago. Today I launched my own youth initiative, and I wanted you to have this. It is our first annual report. It would not exist without you." Elara opened the folder and found pages filled with photographs, testimonials, and statistics detailing the lives Sophia's program had already changed. Her chest tightened with emotion. Sophia's hands trembled slightly. "I also brought something else," Sophia said, handing her a small card. "This is an invitation to our opening gala. The scholarship we award each year is named in your honor." Elara felt her breath catch. "Me?" Sophia smiled. "The Winslow Award for Courage and Renewal. You inspired it." The rooftop fell momentarily quiet around them, as though the world itself paused to honor the moment. Adrian placed a hand gently on the small of Elara's back, grounding her as she absorbed the significance. This, she realized, was the ripple effect of her healing. Not just centers and institutes, but lives reaching out into the world to create more light. After Sophia returned to her guests, Elara turned toward Adrian with eyes shimmering in the golden dusk. "This is more than I ever imagined," she whispered. Adrian nodded softly. "Legacy rarely looks the way we picture it. It grows in the places we never expect." As twilight settled fully over the city, the celebration shifted into its final stage. Guests gathered in a semicircle as Elara stepped forward to speak. She took a breath, letting the moment root itself within her. "Thank you for being here," she began, her voice steady and warm. "When I started New Horizons, I believed I was building a refuge, a place for women to reclaim their lives. But standing here today, I realize we created something far more powerful. We built a community, a home, a movement that proves healing is not a solitary journey, but a collective one. And the legacy we leave behind is not measured in the battles we survived, but in the lives we uplifted along the way." The crowd erupted into applause, the kind that wrapped around her and lifted her from the inside out. As the evening deepened and stars emerged above the terrace, Elara and Adrian slipped away to a quieter corner. Lantern light reflected off the delicate silver band she wore, the promise of a future shaped by choice rather than circumstance. Adrian took her hand and traced his thumb over her knuckles. "You know," he said, "this is only the beginning." She smiled softly, feeling the truth of it settle warmly in her chest. It could be. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city glow beneath them, alive and endless. The wind brushed gently against their faces, carrying the scent of jasmine from the rooftop garden. Elara leaned her head against his shoulder. The past had closed with grace, the future had opened with possibility, and the present was filled with light she had built from her own courage. "I hope," she murmured, "that when people remember me, they remember more than what I overcame." Adrian pressed a soft kiss to her temple. "They will remember what you created." Elara Winslow looked out at the world she had shaped and felt, for the first time, a profound sense of arrival, not at an ending, but at the beginning she had earned with every step, every scar, every choice toward light. Her legacy was alive, and it was only growing brighter.